several hats that I cherish. As the president of the Trinidad and Tobago Writers Guild, as the IAF's first Caribbean member, and as one of the coordinators of the IAF's Caribbean chapter. It's in these roles, rooted in the creative soil of our region, that I welcome you to one of the most urgent conversations of our time, the topic of artificial intelligence. For many of us, those two words can feel distant. Sometimes you feel it's for the tech companies and global economies to worry about. But I'm here today to say that AI is not a far-off storm. It's a current that has already reached our shores. In fact, this conversation is already taking root in our community. During the recently concluded CARIFESTA 15 held in Barbados, the Trinidad and Tobago Writers Guild hosted a symposium on rescripting the Caribbean canon through independent publishing, and the impact of AI on authorship was a central part of that discussion. So for us here in the Caribbean, this is not just a conversation about technology. It's a conversation about the value of our voice, our stories, our poems, our unique cultural expressions. These are the lifeblood of our identity. They are our heritage and our future. In an age where content can be generated in an instant by a machine, we must ask ourselves, what is the fate of the human creator? What is the future of the Caribbean author? And how do we protect our intellectual property and our livelihood when our work can be scraped, ingested, and replicated without consent, compensation, or credit? This is not a challenge we can face alone, island by island. The discussions and the decisions shaping AI are being made in global boardrooms and international policy forums. If we are not in those rooms, then our rights, our needs, and our unique perspective will be overlooked. This is precisely why our membership in the International Authors Forum is not just important, it is essential. The IAF gives the Trinidad and Tobago Writers Guild, and by extension our entire Caribbean chapter, a powerful, unified voice on the world stage. It ensures that the concerns of an author in Belize or a poet in Port of Spain are carried into the same forums as the giants of the creative industries. It connects our local reality to the global fight for authors' rights. And we are not here in this alone either. This crucial conference is a testament to the power of collaboration. I must extend my deepest gratitude to our incredible partners who made this day possible. Jam Copy and Jaiku in Jamaica, my own Trinidad and Tobago Writers Guild, the Circle of Poets of Trinidad and Tobago, Spoken Word 501 from Belize, and the Caribbean Books Foundation in TNT, and our esteemed institutional partner, the UNESCO Multisectoral Regional Office of the Caribbean, and of course, IAF. Our commitment proves that we are stronger together. Today, we will bridge the global and the regional. We will hear from international experts on the front lines of this issue, and we will learn from our own Caribbean trailblazers who are already navigating this new terrain. Our goal is simple: to move from awareness and to leave here today empowered by the knowledge to safeguard our work, protect our rights, and shape a future where technology serves creativity and not the other way around. And so today it is my express pleasure to introduce to some and to present to others Kevin Fitzgerald, Secretary General of the International Authors Forum. He has previously held senior roles at the World Intellectual Property Organization, WIPO, in Geneva, the UK's Copyright Licensing Agency, and various publishing houses. He has a broad experience as a writer for magazines, newspapers, and books. Welcome, Kevin.
Thank you very much, Jewel, for your words of introduction and welcome. And good afternoon to all of the dear colleagues and friends, and in particular to members of the Caribbean chapter. It's my honour to be here as the fairly new Secretary General of the International Authors Forum. A big thank you to all of the organisers, and in particular Katie, for bringing all of this together. The Caribbean has a richness and diversity of creativity and authorship, and that's what makes it a special pleasure for me to participate in this conference. Reflecting on our profession as writers, I think the role of literature is to make a difference in the world. And I'd like to quote Derek Walcott, the Nobel laureate from St. Lucia, who said, "The fate of poetry is to fall in love with the world." And I think this conference has a role to keep authors as key contributors to the fabric of society so that everybody can truly fall in love with the world around us. So a few words about the International Authors Forum. We seek to strengthen the voice of authors in fora where decisions are made about authors' rights at a national level, a regional level, and an international level, UNESCO and the United Nations World Intellectual Property Organization. We are the voice of authors from around the world. And it's really important because there are so many issues being negotiated as part of global copyright treaties and related debates. There are so many issues protecting copyright in the digital age, capacity building for authors groups, fair remuneration, digital distribution, and of course, the key topic of today, the impact of artificial intelligence. Now, the Caribbean also has some unique characteristics which we need to bring into these international fora. So we recognize that you have small domestic markets, high risk of piracy, and that you struggle for global visibility and access to global platforms. And these realities need to sit alongside all of our other advocacy in the international fora. So how are we going to achieve success in these various subjects, and particularly artificial intelligence? Well, we need to maintain and improve our dialogue between our International Authors Forum headquarters and our Caribbean chapter. And we need to create opportunities for Caribbean authors to represent you and us. And we're super happy to be able to tell you that Rachel Collymore from Trinidad will be one of our representatives in Geneva in the next few weeks in one of these debates. So I want to just reaffirm that the International Authors Forum is your forum. We exist to amplify your voices, to protect your rights, and to celebrate your creativity. And I really look forward to this stimulating conference. But before we come to the panel in a few minutes, I want to introduce Philippa Davies, the legal and operations consultant from Jam Copy. So Philippa, over to you, please.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Good morning to everyone. Grateful to be here and for this forum and the topic. And for those who are not familiar with Jam Copy, let me present our credentials and a bit of what our role is in the copyright ecosystem. The Jamaican Copyright Licensing Agency, Jam Copy, we are the national collective management organization for authors and publishers of text, that's literary, and image-based, that's visual art, printed material. We were established in 1998, so we're celebrating 27 years of service to the creative industries. And our specialization is licensing reproduction, that's copying, of extracts of copyright protected literary and artistic works that are published in print. Now, our actual nomenclature is an RRO. We are a reproduction rights organization. So we are an RRO, and the oldest RRO in the English-speaking Caribbean. Now, we receive legal mandates from our author and publisher affiliates to license use of their works on their behalf. And we currently represent 928 affiliates and growing. That's 886 creators and 46 publishers. And we have licenses with 39 local institutions, 2 government, 4 vocational, 21 further education as universities, community colleges, teachers' colleges. And this also includes a corporate university, the Caribbean Military Academy, and 5 Bible colleges. Now, since we were established, we have been a member of the International Umbrella Organization, IFRO, that's the International Federation of Reproduction Rights Organizations. And through this membership, we are also representing thousands of authors and publishers from 44 territories across the globe, including the UK, USA, Canada, South Africa, Zambia, Spain, Australia, Japan, Mexico, Brazil, and many more. And regionally, we are the Secretariat for the Caribbean Reproduction Rights Organizations Agency, CAROSA. CAROSA was established in 2019 for the purpose of managing cross-border licensings in the region for the 5 Caribbean RROs. So there's one in Barbados, one in Belize, one in Jamaica, one in the OECS, the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, and one in Trinidad and Tobago. Now, quickly, what's the benefit of getting a jam copy license, or really an RRO license? Well, I'm sure you will all appreciate that the universal copyright principle is that anyone desiring to use copyright protected material, you're required to obtain permission from the rights holder and possibly pay a fee for the use. RROs, like jam copy, we are a bridge between the user and the rights holder by granting permission through a license. And through our licenses, we're given legal access to a significant number of Jamaican and foreign works so that the user can legally make multiple copies of extracts of those published works for the specific purposes set out in that license. The license is like a legal insurance against liability for actions by authors and publishers for illegal copying. And the license fees that are paid to Jam Copy are then transmitted to the authors and publishers that are affiliated with Jam Copy as royalties. Now, in terms of our role in the AI discussions, we are keenly observing, learning, and taking notes on the legal and technical developments happening globally on the intersection between AI and copyright. Now, we know that new technology has always disrupted ways of doing things, and that can be good and welcomed if the new innovation improves capacity and efficiency. And one of the big issues to resolve with this disruption of AI on the copyright domain is how to keep the delicate balance between encouraging innovation and protecting the rights of creators. How to ensure that creators earn from the use of their works and give permission for that use, while providing access to the public or specific users in need of content. Now, here's the thing. Licensing has the front lead as a recommended solution to maintain that delicate copyright balance. And at Jam Copy, we will be reviewing our licenses to see how to expand the uses covered to include using copyright protected works as training data or in training data for generative AI models. But we'll also have to review our affiliation rules so that they are clear on the nature of works accepted for licensing, so that it has, and we are sure of, it having a predominantly human creator. And that's because the current Jamaican Copyright Act grants ownership of computer-generated works to the human who arranged for the generation of the work. And we believe that this principle can also be extended to recognizing AI as a tool created and used by humans. So the work to be protected under copyright must not be solely machine generated, but subject to human prompts, human directed edits, adjustment, and control. And we believe that this thinking and approach aligns with current global legal opinion. So we're looking forward to the discussions today and continuing exchanges as we in the Caribbean navigate this new landscape together. And I'll close with a quote from Ms. Tracy Armstrong, who is the current president of IFRO, and of which Jamcopy, as I said, is a member. And she confirms that, quote, "It is possible to be pro-copyright and pro-AI. Copyright is essential in the digital age," end of quote. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Philippa. Great words. So we're now going to move on to the international panel for this conference. And I'm going to introduce the speakers.
Very much, Kevin. Good afternoon, everyone from the UK, and good morning to colleagues joining us in the Caribbean. I'm going to start with a question. It's a rhetorical one, so don't feel the need to fill the chat box with answers. But my question is, in the age of generative AI, how do we all stay sane? I spent the last 2 years talking about what feels like nothing else. What is going to happen? What's the impact on copyright? How do authors and other creatives survive this? And I draw sanity from the words of William Golding, American writer, brilliant screenplay writer, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, Oscar winner, The Princess Bride, so he could turn his hand to novels as well. So this is a brain we want to lean on, I think. And when writing about Hollywood and how you could pick the winners and losers, he had a 3-word mantra, which has become quite well known. And it was, nobody knows anything. And that's where I draw sanity from. The more we talk about this, even talking to people within the technology sector, the honest ones tell you, nobody really knows where this is going. And to Kurt's point, we've been here before with other technologies that have promised things. And I think we just have to be comfortable with the fact that this could be existential, generational, transformational, could be a bubble that bursts within a year and we'll be worrying about something else. But I think that is something that I certainly try and keep at the back of my mind. This is evolving, it's strange, it's unusual. It's infuriating, it's interesting, but we have to, I think, as the stewards of authors' rights in our case, just try and be calm and breathe and work out what we're going to do about it. And that's what brings me on to our organisation, the Authors Licensing and Collecting Society, ALCS for short. We fit in the same space that Philippa set out very well when she introduced Jamcopy. So we're a collective rights management organisation. And we were established by a group of writers nearly 50 years ago. You'll find this hard to believe, but they were all sitting together in the pub and they passed around a hat and people put money in, and that was used to incorporate the company. And nearly 50 years later, we're closing in on £750 million paid out to writers for different uses of their work. So I think 2 lessons from that. One is that conversations in the pub can actually lead to quite transformational things in life, if we didn't know that already. But also that the collective nature of what we do is critical, not just groups like this where we talk to each other and share ideas, but also on the business side, on the management side, coming together in bodies like unions and collective management organisations. It gives individual writers greater strength, greater agency in difficult times like these. So, to ALCS, we have about 130,000 writers in our membership. Everyone from J.K. Rowling to someone who's just written their first article in a magazine, so a pretty broad church, really. And I think I can say with honesty that in December 2022, when ChatGPT first emerged, we were as taken unawares as I think probably most people outside of the tech sector were. And as I said before, we've spent the last several years trying to catch up and work out what can we usefully do in this space to make sure that authors are protected and their rights are respected. So we began a dialogue with our members. We had focus groups, but really the most useful seam of information that we mined was a big survey that we ran last summer. If I tell you that when we put our accounts to the members, which is 45 odd million pounds on the balance sheet, we might get 3,000 or 4,000 people voting on it. We had nearly 14,000 responses to our AI survey. People are engaged with this topic like nothing we've ever seen before in the slightly prosaic world of copyright. So this is something that really is in people's minds and causing anxiety as well and uncertainty. And to summarize what the survey told us, you won't be that surprised, I don't think. People wanted transparency. They wanted to know what was going on with their works, things that they hadn't authorized but were just learning about. They wanted to know how they could be compensated for things that had happened in the past that they hadn't authorized. And I'd say those two things, transparency and compensation, got a near universal backing in our survey. Everyone wanted that, and it's quite understandable, I think. When we began to talk about licensing, and I have to say I entirely endorse what Kevin and Kurt have said, if there's a road out of this particular forest, it's licensing that's going to get us there. But the answers to our survey about licensing were a bit more nuanced. There were different levels of comfort with different ideas, should we say. And I think that's entirely understandable given how generative AI has so massively disrupted the creative industries. People are, I think, understandably cautious. They also don't know, like none of us really know, what are the bigger impacts of this technology, not just on creative industries and people's ability to have creative careers. What's it going to do to the environment? What's it going to do to society? What's it going to do to the world that our children grow up in? So understandably, as individuals, writers are not going to say, I'm all in on licensing AI. They want to think about it. They want to reflect and consider. And that's why we've had this dialogue that's ongoing with our members as we start to try and build the different models that can get them that compensation and control that's lacking at the moment. So with our RRO in the UK, the Copyright Licensing Agency, we have been having a lot of discussions and we've been doing a lot of modelling to try and work out what licensing solutions might look like. And before I talk about things like training large language models or fine-tuning them, I'm just going to take a step back and tell you something that we've done adjacent to that, which has already started generating some revenues. And this is something that we call at CLA the workplace license, and you can see this information on their website. But it's essentially spotting something a little bit, I don't want to say the word nerdy, but something quite specific to copyright rules that happens when somebody uses a ChatGPT or a Copilot or a whatever. And quite often people are putting copyright works into these systems to summarize them, to take information out of them. And so the first thing that CLA has done in the UK is started offering businesses a license to do this and saying, here's a Copyright Act that authors and publishers need to authorize and be paid for. So the workplace license for businesses has been running since the spring. And quite a few businesses signing up, and that's looking like a pretty productive route. But that is outside of the conversation that's exercised this past year so much. That is simply about using a copyright work to prompt a system. It doesn't in any way authorize any training of the underlying model or fine-tuning. Just wanted to make that distinction. So the big conversation, the difficult conversation we've been having is about, well, what can we do about training, fine-tuning, the use of works to really promulgate these language models and, of course, turn them into businesses for the people that own them. And we've got pretty far down the road. I'd say before the end of this year, you'll probably see something public coming out in terms of a collective license involving the different members of the RRO. So I should say, as Philippa explained, we are representative within that of authors through ALCS. There's a separate organisation representing the publishers and organisations representing the visual artists. So if you think of a book having all those different rights holders in it, a collective license gives you that whole piece, as it were. And where's the benefit in doing it this way? Why not just leave it entirely to the free market? Why not just let AI companies and publishers work this out between themselves, and then maybe the publishers can talk to their authors and we go from there? I think broadly there are three points to consider here. I think the first point is that there is some of this going on in the market, but quite often the argument, the complaint from the AI companies is, well, licensing is too difficult, copyright's too complicated, there's too much of it, there's too many rights holders, this should be fair use, it's too difficult. One thing that a CMO does is it removes complexity and difficulty and layers of rights clearance. So we sometimes use the phrase, it's a one-stop shop. You could come to the CLA in the UK and get rights for hundreds of thousands of works in one place, in the knowledge that the publishers, authors, and visual artists were consenting and were being paid for it. So I think that's an important point in the discourse. We're putting that one to bed, that it's all too difficult. Licenses are happening between publishers and tech companies, but the ones we hear about are generally very large publishers or publishing groups, and the largest technology companies running the biggest models. So the Murdoch news titles, for example, did a very large deal with OpenAI. What about the smaller publishers? What about the independents? And what about all of the individual creators? We don't want a market that only operates at the sort of elite level for those companies where the AI company thinks, well, that's the repertoire I want, so I'm going to do a secretive deal with those people. We need actually a full market that works for everyone, at least gives opportunity to everyone to participate in it. And what the CMO will do will represent the sort of middle and long tail of publishers, for example, and certainly the creators and the contributors as well. So it gives those people there some agency and some power and some voice in this difficult situation. And the final thing I'd say about the breadth that a CMO offers, and this is quite a recent development on the back of the Anthropic settlement, and I'm sure Umair will have some really good stuff to say about that. But in a world where perhaps the page is turning a little, and some of the companies are starting to wonder about whether there's a penance element to what they've done, and reparations and settlements, this is happening at large scale because the pirate resources that these companies have used have almost unimaginable quantum of pirated works in there. So the amount of authors, publishers, and contributors that need to be considered is huge. And the only place you're going to get that in one hit is through a collective of some sort. So I think on a sort of mechanistic level, there's lots that CMOs, RROs can bring to this debate, both in policy terms, but also in terms of how to make things work that isn't too difficult or too awkward for the tech companies. I think we need to remove those arguments and take those excuses away from them. So I can't say too much more about the licensing that we have in train at the moment, because it is subject to various processes of consultation and consent that we're going through. But I can tell you that we will be able to share something in the coming months. So what I thought I would do as a sort of wrap up is just to talk about the policy situation in the UK, because I think Kurt gave us a very good walk through the European picture and how it's become quite a meandering road with generative AI that has sort of picked bits from different elements of the EU copyright acquis over the years in some slightly strange ways recently. Where is the UK on this? I think it's where it often is. It's sort of got one foot in the US and one foot in Europe, and it's trying to work out quite what to do. We had a big consultation at the start of the year, which set out a way forward that was comparable to the position in the EU. I think it's fair to say that got a fairly resounding raspberry from the creative industries, which are worth about 125 billion to the UK economy, which is not nothing when you're trying to grow your economy in turbulent financial times. So they've stepped back from that position, and conversations are sort of taking place now behind closed doors. There's just been a major reshuffle of government in the UK, so we've got a whole new set of ministers to bring up to speed on all of this. Unfortunately, that's the way of these things. But I think there's a sense that there's going to be a bit of a reset on this policy. But if there are three things that I would say, looking around the table at all of my colleagues from music and from the world of art and film and design and all of the creative and indeed commercial rights holders, so the broadcasters and the publishers and the whole sort of family, as it were, that contributes to that 125 billion of economic value. The three North Stars really are transparency under the law. So not some sort of fudge or a code of conduct that can be ignored or got around, but actual legal regulation explaining that if you are going to be out there in the commercial market using models, you need to be absolutely clear about where you've got your data from, the provenance of it, and indeed the permissions or licensing that you've sought. And I think that's an ongoing battle, it's fair to say, because that's not really where the AI companies are at the moment. And if you look at where most of them are headquartered and operative, certainly the policy in the US at the moment seems permissive, but I'll leave Umair to talk more about that. The second point is, I think we're all pretty well agreed that we shouldn't have to register the rights we've already been given by the law. And there's various conversations and debates around different kinds of registries or databases where people, if they don't want their works to be used by AI companies, would need to register them before they could license their works. And we're pretty resistant to that idea. In the UK, creators and other rights holders get their copyright without formality. And we don't want to start introducing that now just because of this latest wave of technology that's happened in a particular way. And the final pillar of the three is a fair and inclusive marketplace. I said before there's been an element of cherry picking with the AI companies taking the sort of cream of the content under NDAs from large players. That's not a marketplace. That's a sort of shady cartel type setup, and we don't want one of those if this is going to actually contribute to the economy, society, and everything else that its proponents say it will. So we need policy support for things like different kinds of licensing, collective bargaining. We need a genuine dialogue. We need an open conversation between people who are trying to buy something and people who may or may not want to sell something to them. So we need that open marketplace, and we need government to recognise that and facilitate it insofar as it's needed. We don't need great state interventions. We don't need compulsory rules imposed on us. We just need a bit of backing, I think, from the government to say that if we're willing to offer licensing solutions, they shouldn't put impediments in the way like new exceptions or registration rules. So that's where we are in the UK. I started with The Princess Bride, but I fear that AI is more like the never-ending story sometimes. But I do think there'll be something a bit more interesting to say on licensing, certainly before Christmas this year. So keep an eye on our website, on the IAF as well. We'll share with them. And I wish you well for the rest of what will be a very interesting conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Richard. Very encouraging to hear you talking about progress on licensing. That's really, really good news. You mentioned William Golding in your opening remarks, and of course, William Golding also wrote Lord of the Flies, if I recall correctly. And the key message of that work was about the fragility of civilization and the need for rules. And if we don't have sensible rules, then society breaks down. So there's a really interesting analogy to reflect on there. But thank you, Richard. Let's move on to Umair. Umair is the Director of Advocacy and Policy from the US Authors Guild. Umair, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Kevin, Bert, Richard. So always wonderful to share the stage with you. I learned a lot myself. Good morning from New York. As Kevin said, I'm the Director of Policy and Advocacy at the Authors Guild, which is the oldest and largest professional organization of writers in the U.S. We've been active since 1912, serving as the collective voice of American authors. Our mission is to support working authors, advocating for free expression and strong intellectual property rights, fighting for fair contracts and living wage, and building community among authors. Much like Richard, I feel like for the last 2-3 years, I have, it's a never-ending story indeed. I have not talked about anything else other than AI. And I will talk about AI again. It's also interesting to sort of hear the perspectives from EU and the UK being kind of in the center of the storm here. Most of the AI companies are based in the US. The lawsuits are proceeding here, and I will talk a little bit about the Anthropic settlement, which was released. The full proposal was released on Friday, and as we speak, there is a hearing taking place in San Francisco at noon to determine if the court's going to approve that settlement. And I'll talk a little bit about that. I'll start sort of briefly describing what we have been seeing, the harms that the authors have been facing as a result of generative AI. Some of the stuff you've already heard, so I won't belabor those points, but I will mention some, hopefully interesting or bring up some interesting information from the US about these harms that we all kind of recognize. So one of the biggest problem that we are facing is the problem of unauthorized copying. We're talking about millions of books straight from pirate sites, and if you've been following the two lawsuits here, the Cadre Meta lawsuit and the Bart's v. Anthropic lawsuit, we know now that Anthropic downloaded approximately 7.5 million ebooks from Library Genesis and the pirate library Mirror called Pillamy, which is an archived version of another notorious pirate website called Z Library that the Authors Guild was involved in assisting the U.S. government to take down through a criminal copyright infringement indictment a few years ago, I think 2022, and the U.S. government seized at the time around 200 domains of this notorious pirate site called Z Library, arrested 2 of its principals, who were Russian nationals. The FBI arrested them in Argentina as they were on vacation, and the last I heard, there were still extradition actions going on in Argentina. So very much a live issue. Unfortunately, knowing everything, the AI companies did not shirk from accessing those sites that were under criminal copyright indictment and downloading millions of books. So what kind of harm are we looking at when, an AI company goes to a pirate site and gets this massive trove of books? Well, one of the things we are that hurts is the growing burgeoning, and we hope as with the efforts of ALCS and other organizations, the market for licensing for AI training. So if you're, in one of the cases, I forget which one it was, but it was a case here that was litigated between the publishers and Internet Archive, and the judge in that case said, well, you can't compete with free. So if you have a free substitute for something that you might pay for, the value of that paid service or license goes down. So that's one of the harms of AI companies going to pirate websites and getting books from there. The second, this harm was also recognized in the copyright, the U.S. Copyright Office's AI report, which is an ongoing project. They've released 3 parts of that report. Unfortunately, like with most things in the U.S., the Copyright Office is in flux. The register was fired by the administration, and right now there is no register of copyright. But this report was fortunately released. It was a very almost dramatic showdown. It seemed, the report was released on a Friday or something, and the register was fired on the Saturday. And even though we've heard that the two were not related, we know that this administration has is very close to big tech interests. The tech oligarchs are constantly at the White House, flattering the president and the administration, and so we're looking at a very different landscape, as with regards to AI regulation, that we were looking at even like 2 years ago. And but anyway, not to sort of get ahead of myself, the AI report, part 3 of it was really interesting because it focused on the fair use question and generative AI training. And we've talked a little bit about fair use. It's such a I can't. I'm trying to come up with a good analogy, but we always fear that it's kind of like a virus that's going to sort of migrate to other places like the EU and the UK and Canada, and sort of demolish some of the copyright protections that exist in those countries. And we in the US don't want that. The Authors Guild has always sort of argued for a balanced fair use approach. The fair use doctrine expanded dramatically in the courts in the aftermath of the Google Books decision, which Kurt talked about, and the settlement was not approved. But essentially, the courts came to view as any kind of transformation. Any kind of transformative use as being allowable fair use. And we're also sort of seeing the tides turn a little bit. There have been some cases. There was the Andy Warhol case from a couple of years ago in the Supreme Court, where the court said, transformativeness is not the end of the inquiry, it's the start of the inquiry, and that you have to factor in all of the other factors, like the impact on the potential market for the works that are being used, and that's that potential market harm is coming up as a key issue right now in both the cases and the policy discussions around AI. And in the AI report, the Copyright Office devoted a significant amount of time to that. And I'll go into that a little bit. When I talk about market dilution, which is probably the biggest risk that we're looking at, is that generative AI systems are being used to produce low quality ebooks that are competing with authors' works in marketplaces. We at the Guild have seen examples of AI generated books dominating Amazon bestseller lists. So-called publishers using AI to generate books on closely related or very similar topics that pop up for sale almost immediately after the author's book is listed for pre-order, preempting the sale of human authored works. We are seeing generative AI being used to produce biographies of authors who have written memoirs or upcoming memoirs. So the AI generated biographies, often sort of using Wikipedia and some of these sources, they've almost preempt the market for that memoir that's coming down. And I mean, if your publisher is selling a hardcover memoir for $30, or even a standard ebook for $10, and you have a biography, an authorized biography going for 99 cents or $5.99, then a consumer might be confused and may opt for that AI generated biography as opposed to buying the actual book that pays the author royalties. And oftentimes these books will appear on marketplaces next to or around the search results for the listing. So there is a real likelihood of consumer confusion. We've seen a lot of AI generated summary books. Summaries are a bizarrely huge business, and especially now with I know that in sort of like the tech world, a lot of the quote unquote tech bros are really interested in knowing everything, learning about everything, but they don't want to read the books. So there are all of these apps where, summary apps and the like, and they are increasingly AI based. We've seen examples of unauthorized derivative works. One famous example was a developer used ChatGPT to write the concluding book in George R. R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire series. And also we've seen chatbots that allow users to sort of converse with the book or converse with the author of the book, that are all unauthorized, and they violate the exclusive derivative works rights of the authors. And of course, they take money out of the author's publisher's hands. So, market dilution is a huge problem. We've been talking about it for, a couple of years, and it is increasingly getting noticed. It was the Copyright Office, as I said, in part 3 of its AI report, devoted a substantial portion to market dilution. There's an interesting shift that we're seeing there in terms of how courts and policymakers look at market dilution, because in a kind of traditional fair use analysis, the substitution is 1-to-1. So it's the impact on the potential market for. So if I write, if I write a fantasy novel, and someone writes another fantasy novel using my characters, the inquiry would be on, how does that directly displace my novel? But we are also starting to look at kind of an expansive view of market dilution that kind of construes the market broadly as the market for all books on psychology. It kind of departs from this this substantial similarity analysis that courts engage in when they're looking at market harm. Like, is the allegedly fair use copy substantially similar? How close it is to the copyrighted work? And this came up interestingly in the Meta case that I will talk about, which is, both of the case, the Anthropic and the Meta cases are very unusual, which we. It's not surprising, because this is these issues have never been tried before. It's an entirely new technology. It kind of goes back to the early copyright cases, early 20th century copyright cases around photography. So we're kind of seeing judges, be a little experimental also in terms of how they're looking, how they're adjudicating these cases. Just quickly, I will say that the Copyright Office in its report quoted, quote unquote, said the speed and scale at which AI systems generate content pose a serious risk of diluting markets for works of the same kind as their training data. This means more competition for sales of an author's work and more difficulty for audiences in finding the works. And then lastly, the harm we're seeing is on freelance writing, job displacement, which I think is every profession is kind of facing that in some respect. We do know that content writers, for instance, have dramatically lost work, and this impacts our members because book writers or professional authors they're not always earning their money, earning their income from writing their novel oftentimes, or writing their nonfiction or book of memoir. Those are often the projects that they really want to work on, but they earn their living. Sustainable income that they get is from taking on other projects like ghostwriting, copywriting, web and marketing, content writing. So the loss of this freelance work that supplements book income will really dramatically hamper how writers can basically survive. And the fear is that as a result, we have even fewer talented writers who would be able to devote much of their professional lives to writing, meaning fewer great books and less diversity in what gets published. So they're pretty important ramifications for what kind of a future for authorship we're looking at right now. Quickly, I'll go over our advocacy, what we've been doing. So our advocacy and kind of like the advocacy platforms of most creator groups have focused on what we call 3 C's: credit, consent, and compensation. No training without the consent of the author. Compensation, so kind of basically the notion is you need to license the works. You can't just take them. And credit when the works are used in outputs and the like. So that's kind of like the bedrock from which we start all of our advocacy and build forward. We have been involved in our own class action lawsuit and supporting the other author class action lawsuits going on. Our lawsuit is against OpenAI, and it's being litigated in the Southern District of New York. We have 13 high-profile authors that are plaintiffs, and the Authors Guild is also one of the plaintiffs. And we have standing because some of the literary estates that we own are we think are in part of the training data sets that were used to train ChatGPT. But we're also supporting these two now. So essentially, like when the LLM lawsuit started, there were lots of them, and now they started getting consolidated. The two, the one in the Southern District is proceeding. There's discovery happening, but the two importantly in the Northern District of California, Cadre v. Meta and Barks v. Anthropic have been decided, and I will talk about them a little bit in just 1 second. So in addition to the lawsuits, we're actively engaging with U.S. lawmakers at the state and federal levels, the Copyright Office, the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, and other agencies to push for laws and regulations that would require AI developers to disclose copyrighted data in training and label AI-generated material to sort of mitigate that market dilution that I was talking about. We're actively supporting licensing, and we have a partnership with a platform called Created by Humans. We work with them very closely to develop the terms and conditions for licensing. We are really concerned about downstream protections. For instance, the use of verbatim text from authors' training works in the outputs. So the terms that we work with Created by Humans on limit that to no more than 7 verbatim words from words from work. Also, no use of character names and the likes. So essentially, if the platform Created by Humans gets into a licensing agreement with an AI company, those protections would carry over into the licensing agreement, and the AI company would not be able to have functionality such as extensive verbatim quoting, or as a creation of derivative words, or use of character names and world building and things of that sort in the outputs. We're also kind of seeing that in some of the other licensing deals that we've seen. HarperCollins, big US publisher, had a licensing deal with Microsoft for 5,000 nonfiction books for $5,000 a work, and the author gets half of that. And part of that was obligating the licensee to set guardrails in how the works could be used downstream. So importantly, we also launched a human authored label to distinguish genuine human creativity from in the AI saturated market. It's a registered trademark with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. Authors can sign up for it through a portal on our website, and they agree to a contract that says that there is no AI generated material, or the AI generated material in the work that they're claiming to be human authored is de minimis. So it allows for, say, spell check, a little bit of grammar, but it doesn't allow for actually using AI generated text in the work, or developing a story outline, or doing extensive sort of like copyrightable work through an AI and then transforming it into a work. So that kind of covers what we're doing. And so, yeah, I mean, I think everyone's probably curious to hear a little bit about these two law cases, these two AI cases. So they're both in the Northern District of California, and both the Kadri v. Meta case and the Anthropic case were the opinions came down within days, and the opinions could not have been, they're diametrically opposed opinions, but I'll kind of and very confusing. So the first opinion to come down was, I believe, was the Bart's opinion, which the Anthropic opinion, which is now in settlement phase. And in that case, the Judge Alsop said that using works to train AI was an exceedingly transformative use and fair use. So they're saying, yeah, you can use books without permission of the author to train AI. But he also said that Anthropic downloaded 7.5 million illegal books and created the central library from which to. So essentially what Anthropic was doing is they created this library. The developers said, we want every book ever written, and we want to have them, store them in our servers. And from that, like the engineers, as they were fine tuning or changing the Claude algorithm, they could go out and pick what they needed. At some point, what they brought in, because they started getting concerned about the potential copyright liabilities, they brought in, forgetting this gentleman's name, but he was involved in the Google Books project, the scanning and digitization project, and they changed their strategy. So what they then did was they went out and bought all of the 7.5 million books that they had downloaded from the pirate websites, Library Genesis and Z Library, and scanned those books and created a repository from used book scans. And the court said that was likely fair use, that you because they didn't actually download the books from pirate websites but got and purchased the books and scanned them, that's potentially fair use. But if you download them, then it's still fair use if you use the books to train them, but the act of downloading is copyright infringement. So they kind of separated it. Now, that raises this sort of chicken and egg kind of questions, like how do you get all of these books without the permission of the author? If you're not licensing them, how do you get them without also being on the hook for, at one point before the settlement was reached, they were facing existential, mortal copyright damages. They would have gone out of business. So that's a question that we're still, struggling to sort of see, clearly. Like there's one path, which is to sort of digitize the books, but even that is not a clear-cut legal answer, because in the Second Circuit, where we are litigating the OpenAI case, there is precedent there's the Internet Archive case that I mentioned, where the court said that you can't just wholesale scan books, and that format shifting is not transformative, because you're still displacing the potential market for the licensing. It's going to be very interesting. Now, the Meta case, which came down a couple of days after, basically said that the authors that the authors would have won, and this would not be fair use because what the judge saw as a devastating harm to the market dilution. This judge was very interested in market dilution and kind of construing market dilution not as one-to-one replacement of a singular book, but in the aggregate, what do AI generated books do? And I mean, intuitively, we kind of see, oh yeah, if you have like a surfeit of AI generated books, you're not going to find human generated books. The value is going to go down. But the judge was really looking for specific evidence as to the potential for market harm, and he was not able to get it from the plaintiffs in this case. So he actually denied. There was a cross motion for summary judgment. Meta said this is fair use, and the plaintiff said it's not. And the judge said, well, authors, like I would have like pretty much given you this judgment, but I didn't get the right type of evidence, so I'm going to rule for Meta. But in the opinion, he devotes a substantial amount of time on this notion of market dilution. So yeah, I mean, we're sort of trying to figure out like what this means. I mean, of course, like these are also opinions that AI companies are, like AI companies or the AI sector is sort of touting as a win for them. The creators are. It's a hermeneutically complex situation right now that we're facing in the US. So I think with that, well, I mean, let me maybe this will come up in the Q&A, but I can talk a little bit more about where the settlement is. I know John early on before we got on this panel, and this is probably important to Caribbean authors as well. So international authors are included in the settlement, but there are requirements for the settlement class, which the books have to have an ISBN number or an ASIN number, which is the Amazon identifier, and they have to have been registered with the U.S. Copyright Office within 5 years of publication and before Anthropic downloaded them. The date for that cutoff for the download date has been set as August 2022. So anything that was published after August 2022 is not going to be part of the class. Anything that was not registered with the Copyright Office before Anthropic downloaded them, or within 3 months of publication, it's this weird kind of like subcategory that the judge created to accommodate books that were published around the time of that cutoff date. As long as those books were registered within 3 months, they could be part of the class. But anyway, I mean, if the book was registered but not registered within 5 years of publication, it's not part of the class. So, but critically, the domicile of the author is not excluding authors from the class. And the settlement was reached for $1.5 billion. That kind of estimated comes out to $3,000 per work. Which will, if there's a publisher involved, the settlement goes to all legal and beneficial owners of the copyright. So if an author signs a publishing contract, the publisher becomes the exclusive owner of the reproduction right, but the author remains the beneficial owner. So in that case, that'll be split, and there's some questions that we will figure out as we move forward. The proposal talks about creating an author-publisher working group that will look at the contracts and determine the allocations. So Mary Ratzenberger, our CEO, is going to be on that. Hopefully, the judge is going to consider all of these questions today in a couple of hours. Noon San Francisco time is the hearing. So I think I'll close with that. And I totally forgot that I actually had a PowerPoint deck that was, but never, it was not anything more than what I said, just so you could follow along. Anyhow.
Well, thank you very much, Umair. That was very interesting indeed. And this market dilution is, of course, a concern for everybody. Now, we did start a little bit late, but we have quite overrun our slot. And as I said at the beginning, there's going to be a time allocated at the end for questions and answers. So I think what I'd like to do is to suggest that we hold questions for the international panelists until we've heard the more local panelists. Then we'll take all the questions together at the very end, if that's okay. In which case, I would like to pass the floor now to Casey Garvey, please, who is a poet and founder and managing director of JAICU. So I'm passing the floor to you, please, Casey.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Let me just do one last test. I want to make sure everybody is seeing me and hearing me clearly.
Hearing you, yes, and now seeing you. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, thank you very much. And let me get into it. All right, so thank you. And once again, welcome to this forum. And this time we're turning our attention to the Caribbean. Before we begin, I want to take a moment to applaud the speakers from our earlier global panel. The insights they shared, particularly on the evolving relationship between AI and copyright law, have laid a strong foundation for the conversations we're about to have. They've illuminated complex terrain that authors now navigate globally, and their perspectives have underscored just how urgent and far-reaching these discussions truly are. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Casey Garvey. I'm a poet, a Jamaican, and the founder of JAICU, which maybe some of you have picked up on is a play on haiku, which is a Japanese style of poetry. And JAICU is a nonprofit organization that has been transforming the poetry landscape by empowering poets to sharpen, market, and deploy their skills to a wide range of clientele. I also spearheaded the launch of the Caribbean chapter of the International Authors Forum, which, as you can see today, has blossomed into a thriving, active community that is armed with awareness and ambition in regards to copyright. It has been both an honor and a mission to create a space within this global movement that reflects, respects, and responds to the lived realities of Caribbean writers. The Caribbean has always been a space of literary brilliance, where resistance, identity, memory, and imagination come alive through words. Our authors are custodians of culture, history, and innovation. But like much of the global South, we face a complex terrain when it comes to artificial intelligence. Many Caribbean writers are still grappling with a foundational understanding of AI, what it is, how it works, and what it means for the future of creative labor. Access to information, training, and technical infrastructure remains uneven, making it difficult to demystify the technology and engage with it critically and effectively. At the same time, the promise of AI as a creative tool is undeniable, as so many of our speakers have highlighted today. Yet for many, there's a gap between potential and practice. Maximizing AI's efficiency, whether for research, drafting, publishing, or promotion, requires access, support, and capacity building that often lags behind more resource markets. There's also deeper questions around how to integrate AI meaningfully into our creative processes without compromising artistic integrity or diluting cultural nuance. For Caribbean authors, storytelling is more than output. It is heritage, resistance, and reclamation. We cannot afford to lose that essence to automation or algorithm. And finally, the need for stronger collaboration across the region has never been more urgent. By building this resilient community of writers right here at the Caribbean chapter of the IAF, who share knowledge, pool resources, and shape strategy, we can collectively ensure that the Caribbean literary voice keeps pace with global developments while staying grounded in our own truth. This panel is a step towards that goal. We'll hear from writers, thinkers, and cultural leaders who are not only navigating AI, but actively shaping how it is understood and used in our region. Let's move forward together with creativity, with clarity, and with purpose. Thank you.
Thank you, Casey. I believe it's my turn now. Hi, everybody. I'm Alex Olvera. I'm the president of AMETLI, which is the Mexican Literary Translators Association. And I won't talk a lot about me because we are running behind. So if anybody wants to know a little bit more, please feel free to email me or check our social media and our website. And there you will be able to find a lot of information. I would just like to move right ahead to present our speakers so that we can have this conversation. First, I was asked to talk a little bit about my perspective and my experience regarding AI and how we translators in Mexico deal with it, especially literary translators, because there's this element of originality and creativity involved. But I'm going to refrain a little bit because I would like to hear first from the speakers and then engage in this conversation. So first, I'm going to present Paul Hector, who is the advisor for communication and information for UNESCO for the Multisectorial Regional Office of the Caribbean. You can read more about him also on the appropriate website. And Hector, I give the floor to you.
All right. Thank you very much, Alex. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, we are.
Okay. Let's see, I'm just trying to find mine. Okay, great, awesome. So, well, good day, everyone. The UNESCO Regional Office for the Caribbean is, of course, very happy to be here, and I salute all of the persons who've made today's event possible. I'd like to share with you about an exploratory survey on which seeks to understand how artificial intelligence is impacting the Caribbean's creative sector. And this study is part of our efforts to implement what's called the Caribbean Artificial Intelligence Policy Roadmap. And the survey findings will help us to design programs that we expect will enhance the implementation of this roadmap and also address the emerging challenges that authors and poets in the 20 Dutch and English-speaking Caribbean countries we serve are facing. No, the roadmap that I referred to, it's the result of an extensive regional-wide survey, and which involved research, which involved consultations with over 1,000 individuals and institutions across the region, including CARICOM and other leaders in this area. Now, the Caribbean AI Policy Roadmap aims to help the region to unlock the benefits of artificial intelligence and to use AI responsibly to support sustainable development of the region's economies, societies, and of course, to protect the environment. Now, this roadmap also supports the implementation of UNESCO's recommendation on the ethics of artificial intelligence. Now, this recommendation, it's a non-binding international legal instrument which was adopted in November 2021 by UNESCO's 193 member states. Now, to fully benefit from AI, it's quite obvious that we need various types of guidance. And this is where the AI policy roadmap comes in to help the region shape its digital future, to create and also take advantage of the opportunities for growth, innovation, and well-being. But again, of course, to also guard against the potential risk. And to do this, the roadmap addresses 4 key areas. Culture and creativity, which is, of course, essential and very relevant to our conversation today. It looks at governance and transformation. We need to have rules in place to manage AI, manage the various actors who are involved, and of course, upskilling and educating the society, the people, so that persons are in a position to leverage the opportunities, and of course, resiliency and sustainability. We're in a very fragile environment subject to climate change and its accompanying challenges. We're also economically vulnerable to what's going on around the world. And so together, these 4 pillars provide a sort of a nucleus around which we wish to leverage AI to build the future that we want for our region. Now, today, I'm just going to very briefly touch on the culture and creativity pillar. So again, just as the name implies, this pillar looks at using AI to celebrate, to develop the Caribbean's unique cultural identity, its heritage. We see AI as a tool that can help boost creativity in areas like tourism, media and the arts, and of course, keeping our heritage alive and relevant. And of course, within this, there are a number of policy and action areas which need to be addressed. And we've been hearing about, for example, copyright. There's also the aspect of digitization. How do we enhance access to information? How do we promote safe, ethical and respectful use of AI? How do we counter misinformation? And how do we create spaces where artists and AI experts can actually bring these tools, these new tools together to give an avenue for new forms of creative and innovative endeavor. So to support this work, we've been conducting this exploratory study, and this is just a very first step in understanding how Caribbean authors and poets, both in the region and in the diaspora, are interacting with AI, and also how they feel about AI. In addition to the survey, we are also conducting one-on-one interviews to gain deeper insights and learn more about their perspectives. So, and as part of this work, we're exploring not just who Caribbean authors are, but also how they work, how much of their livelihood is coming from writing, and also how are they engaging with artificial intelligence, and also what languages they are publishing in. And so from this, we expect to capture perceptions about the opportunities, the risks, and the needs. And this, of course, will enable UNESCO to then develop programs, initiatives, actions, etc., which can respond to these concerns. Now, so far, in our survey, we have only reached some 55 Caribbean authors. And I'd like to appeal to everyone here to help us in terms of getting more word out about this survey so that we can have more persons participating. The more people who participate, both from the region and the diaspora, the more holistic an understanding we have of the concerns, challenges, and needs. So far, we've found in our small sample that women form the majority of the respondents. And so presumably it would seem as if they perhaps dominate in the, in the field of those who are authors and poets. Perhaps Casey being here, it's also, signals this. And we see something like roughly 78% of our respondents being female, 22% male. We've also recognized that even across these 20 countries that we are focused on, we are seeing a variety of languages used: English, Dutch, Papiamento, Srenan, Tongo, and of course, various Creoles, various Patois, French, and Spanish also. Now, again, digging into who these authors are, and we've seen that, for example, a large proportion of them, 62%, are between the ages of 35 and 64. But we also see that there are a good number of authors who are above and also below this age group. So this is quite interesting. When we look at, for example, where these authors are located, which countries they originate from, we see Jamaica and Trinidad and Tobago dominating. And this is perhaps not surprising, as these are the two largest English-speaking countries in the region. However, we've also been able to capture some perspectives from other countries: Curacao, Suriname, and so forth. So really, we need your help to reach more authors in more countries so that we can understand what their experiences are like. We've also looked at how long have these people been in writing, and we see that more than half of them have been pursuing creative works in the literary fields for more than a decade. Some of them belong to writing associations. So this is really important because we can understand that there is a core of experienced professionals, people who are looking to really make writing a craft and also a source of income. Now, however, one of the challenges we find is that when we look at their income, most authors in the survey earn less than 10% of their total income from writing or poetry. At the same time, however, there is a very small but notable group of poets and authors, about 13%, who are earning more than 50% of their income from literary related activities. So of course, we really want to understand how they're doing this. We know that, for example, the creative economy has a lot of promise for our region. And so how can we understand what they're doing right and perhaps share this so that others can also tap into it? Now, naturally, we're of course very interested to understand how AI is being used by these poets and authors. And what we found is that at least 60% of the respondents are using AI in their work. Some persons have not used it, have no knowledge about it. Some are almost allergic to it. Others are, of course, more engaged. Some persons who reported using AI, they mentioned tasks, for example, such as brainstorming ideas, using AI to support them in translating their works into other languages, and also, interestingly, creating social media posts to advertise their work. So again, very interesting. What we've seen, though, again, with the caveat that this is a very small survey, those who use AI more frequently seem to be the ones who are reporting higher incomes shares from their writing. And this is indicating that AI may be helping some authors and poets in their professional activities. And in a few of the conversations we've heard that we've had so far, authors have pointed to the sort of time saving of AI, AI helping them to get to reach more persons through, for example, advertising and so forth. And this seems to be some of the reasons behind AI helping them to increase their incomes. Again, of course, a lot more work needs to be done. And so what are survey participants overall saying about AI? Well, from what we've seen so far, the Caribbean authors, they see AI as a bit of a double-edged sword. On one side, they talk about the opportunities. For example, they highlight the potential for it to boost their productivity, to enable them to edit much more quickly, to conduct more research, and also to expand their global reach and open new creative possibilities. And this is very important because many of these authors are working very much on their own. At the same time, many of these authors are also very concerned about certain risks, copyright infringement, potential cultural homogenization, and other things. One thing we found, though, is that there is a relatively uneven awareness of copyright and what it means. So this points to some areas that we need to focus on. Now, if we look at global averages, I understand that somewhere between about 0.5 and 1% of the population are engaged in the literary field. So it means that across the Caribbean, we may have potentially, 35,000 to 70,000 poets. So for our survey, I think we're just really touching the very top of what's there. Perhaps this has to do with the informality of the sector. So again, lots of work to be done in terms of really leveraging the potential of the orange economy. I appeal to you, join the survey, help us to spread the word. There's a QR code that I have here. And thank you very much for the time to be here and to share with you what we've been doing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Paul. This was a very interesting presentation, also because I was just thinking about the survey that CERLALC has conducted also recently. And there are some similarities, for instance, in terms of how women tend to be the majority of not only of respondents, but of those who dedicate themselves to a certain artistic or creative endeavor. But also we tend to be the ones who are earning less from those creative endeavors. So I found that very interesting. And in that regard, I wanted to ask you a question. You mentioned that of those respondents who are using AI, the ones who are using it the most seem to be those who earn also more of their income from these creative activities. And I was wondering, could it be could it be that that the correlation is in that if they are earning more of their income from creative activities, they are also more established, and perhaps they are using AI for activities such as you mentioned, for marketing, for promotion, and not necessarily for their creative endeavor?
Yes. In fact, okay, so two things. So as you mentioned, it's not that the ones who are using AI more are earning more. No, among those who earn more, we see a higher proportion of persons who use AI more. And
Yes,
and as I
exactly.
said,
Sorry if I
uh,
misexplained it, but that's what I meant. Yes, thank you for the clarification.
okay, all right. And again, in terms of using AI to reduce certain costs, for example, editing, and again, of course, more rapid turnaround time. One respondent who I spoke with, they mentioned, for example, doing things like mass mailings and helping using AI to, for example, generate and automate, you know, efforts to reach out to publishers, etc. And so by saving a lot of time, with one effort, they could, as they put it, reach 300 persons. And so whereas those who don't use these tools, then of course it takes them much longer. And I think in many of these things, it's a bit of a numbers game. Yeah. So
Thanks so much. Thanks so much for your input. I don't know if you would like to say something else. If not, I'm just going to move on to the next participant, and then we can continue the dialogue.
Thank you. And I appreciate any assistance that IAF can give us in terms of getting word out about the survey, because again, as I said, this is an initiative which seeks to support, assist, all poets, authors, and of course, this will perhaps be a jumping off point for supporting others in the creative sector. Thank you.
Of course. Thanks so much. And I believe we are going to provide the links or the appropriate information so that people can fill out this survey. The IAF will provide that information. Thanks so much, Paul. Okay, so now I'm going to present Rachel Collymore. I hope I'm pronouncing her last name correctly. She's an IP consultant for Power Media Hub and poet. She's a board secretary and former VP for the Circle of Poets of Trinidad and Tobago. And she has over 15 years of experience in IP advocacy. So I believe she will have a thing or two to say. Thanks so much, Rachel, and welcome. I would like to start with a question. Of course, you are free to give your presentation as you see fit, but maybe so that we can start thinking about this. And the question is, how can authors strengthen their position and ensure they put AI to good and are not used by it? And this is related to what Paul was telling us about how these authors are using AI, sometimes for administrative activities that in fact help us have more free time for other more creative endeavors. Thank you.
Good day, everyone, and thank you for the introduction. I am Rachel Collymore from Trinidad and Tobago, and so far the discussion that we've been hearing thus far is very informative, and I must lean on what has been echoed by Kurt and Richard's presentation about the use and the need for licensing of AI, generative AI, in the space of us protecting the rights of authors and creative practitioners in the field. Now, I am also a practitioner in the creative field as well as a user of AI, and I've recognized that there is an underlying relationship between the two, and we cannot get away from it. The horse has already bolted the stable. In terms of how we strengthen our position, it is important that we understand, one, the value of our work, as well as the way forward. And that way forward, as mentioned by, I believe that was Richard's presentation, I think we need to now step in this space and get our CMOs and licensed organizations like the IFRO, and we have our Trinidad and Tobago Reprographic Rights Organization. We have cut out the CMOs to come together to find and present frameworks in order to protect our creative practitioners. I think that is essentially what is needed in order to safeguard our writers from abuse and also to encourage that valuable exchange and increase the potential for earnings by our creators and our authors. Now, I heard a lot mentioned about generative AI, and now we are on the cusp of talking more about agentic AI in terms of how everyone has been utilizing these forms of chatbots in their day-to-day activities and creating, I guess, automating processes in order to streamline their work and also to save time. And that's another aspect of things that we may need to talk about. How do we now see the potential for AI in terms of getting rid of mundane exercises, mundane work, in order to really tap into our creative output and how we channel those creative outputs. So from that perspective, I think that there is value, but we need to ensure that we do not leave AI as to do its own bidding without certain safeguards in place. And I think that there's a lot of work taking place in the EU, in the US, as well as China, in order to safeguard our creatives from exploitation. And I think that's what is happening right now, the use of the exploitation of AI, and also paying for use of training those AI models. And now I think that there is also a conversation about the shift from large language models to now smaller language models, because there's also the environmental impact that we also need to factor into the conversation. And therein lies where I think there's more to be said in that case. I welcome other questions and also for us to have a valuable exchange in this exercise.
Thank you, Rachel. You mentioned something very important, which I believe we can all agree about, which is exploitation. I think what makes us maybe more afraid than anything else is precisely that, right? I believe that creative people are by nature curious. We all are curious, and if it were not for the very rapid and all-encompassing exploitation that we've seen, maybe many more of us would be more curious about AI and would be using it in many different ways. But here I am speaking from my experience as the president of my association and also as a translator. Many of us have stayed away from it, not because of a lack of curiosity, but precisely because we want to move very carefully, because we know that all the actions that we take are going to have an effect, are going to have a consequence. And of course, we do not mean to damage, to hurt our colleagues and ourselves and hurt our sources of income. What concrete steps could we take now? And this is going to be a very hard question probably, because I'm asking you the $1 million question here. But what concrete steps could we take now as authors to ensure that we minimize the effects of that exploitation, so that we can avert it as much as possible?
I will tackle it from the standpoint of what I'm seeing taking place in terms of the safeguards. Now, the AI systems that we use, the most popular one, ChatGPT and others, have now implemented these safeguards where you can turn off their right to use your work to train their systems, their models. So I think that is one step that we can look into and to see how best we can ensure that they adhere to those guidelines. Additionally, I think it's also important that, as I said, we need to go back to our CMOs now. I heard Richard mention about, and I want to quote him correctly, he says that copyright is too complicated. And so we need to look at the CMOs to implement licenses, or maybe even look at our legal practitioners to work with our CMOs, those in the intellectual property arena and entertainment law arena, to look at areas where we can now implement systems to have that balance, to balance the scale. AI is not going anywhere. And there will be more advances in technology as we move forward. And at the speed at which AI is evolving, I don't think that we can slow it down. However, I think we need to have more conversations like these. We need to engage not only from a Caribbean perspective, but we need to engage with our international partners, like the International Authors Forum and others, to really find comparable solutions that can benefit all, because it's no longer that, okay, I'm in this country and you're in that country and we do what we have to do from our own silos, but we really need to have a collective approach in order to make the best of what we have, what is available to us now.
I totally agree with you. And that has been my experience being a member of IAF, with Ametli being a member of IAF. We have been able to exchange different perspectives and experiences. And it's been really enriching for us, because we've been able to put into practice certain things that we had not even thought about, but that the other members have suggested to us. So here I am going to do a little bit of advertisement, but if you have not joined IAF, if your organization has not joined IAF, I thoroughly recommend you do it, because as Rachel just said, we could do things on our own, but we are not at that stage where any of us is going to survive if we go about our business as usual by ourselves. Thank you, Rachel. And well, of course, I just want to remind you, if you have not asked your questions in the chat, wow, now I see a ton of questions. This is going to be super interesting. But if you have a question and you haven't asked it, please write it in the chat so that then we can moderate them at the end. Remember also that from the previous panel, we didn't have questions because of time issues and also the flow of this panel. So please do ask also your questions there. And now, moving on. I am going to present somebody who I am very fond of, because we had the opportunity to meet in Guadalajara, Mexico, and talking about enriching experiences. It was very enriching for me to not only interpret for him, but also share the floor and talk as authors. So I would like to introduce John Deegan. For those of you for whom the name sounds familiar, but don't know who he is. John Deegan is, oh, sorry, I'm so sorry. I'm skipping Marcia. She's right there.
I was just going to say, thank you.
Yes, I'm so glad I just saw you. I'm so sorry, Marcia. Before John, I'm going to introduce Marcia Gomez. Very beautiful last name, by the way. Gomez McKee. Marcia is a Trinidadian self-published author. She's a storyteller and an illustrator and founder of the Caribbean Books Foundation, who makes her living from her creative work and is experienced as a user of AI in her content. So I believe she will have a lot of very nice ideas for us authors as to how to use AI in our benefit and as a tool and not as this all-devouring monster that some of us think it is. So thanks, Marcia, for being here. And again, I'm going to pose a question and you may choose to answer it right now or at the end as you see fit. So this is another $1 million question. Can an author still be an author in the age of AI? You are on mute.
Yes, let me take it
Thanks.
off. So can an author be an author in the age of AI? Okay, I'll answer it. Let me go through. So I am usually, what my general philosophy about anything is, because there's a train, and now there's an AI train, it doesn't mean I have to get on it. And then if I am on the train, it doesn't mean I have to get off of it. So I watch what I have to do and I formulate rules. So what I'm going to do today is share my AI rules with you, and that is going to show how I work. So my first rule for AI is to be fair. In my use of AI, I will not infringe on any other artist's work. And when I say artist, I am an illustrator, I'm an author, I'm an actual watercolor artist. So I have a lot of creative stuff going on when the day comes. So when I write my books, I usually do the cover designs. If it's a children's book, I do the children's illustration. So AI has affected me all around. So the first thing I do is that I be fair. And the wonderful thing about AI is that even if you're doing art or if you're doing work, you can ask AI, where did you get this information from? And it gives you the truth. It gives you the source. So whenever I am doing anything with AI, and I feel it feels a little weird, it's not something that I uploaded, but it's something that I'm downloading. I always say, can I get the source for this? So when I get the source now, I could make the decision if I'm going to use it or if I'm not going to use it. And I think authors have to AI has that option. Authors have to become comfortable asking AI, where did you get this information from? And the AI is a computer, is very open. It gives you exactly where you get the information from. And if you see that information is coming directly from somebody's presentation, I don't use it. Because then I'm infringing on something that somebody else would have done. So I say, so I would say, do you have an alternative source for this? And if I can't get an alternative source, I know where the library is. I go to the library and I do other stuff. When I was doing this book, so the Caribbean Folklore Legends, the librarian said he remembered me. I was in the library. I actually designed the cover of the book. This book has no AI in it. no AI at all in it. So I have different books and I have rules for different things. So that's my first rule. I am going to be fair and I'm going to ask AI where it gets the information from. And then I'm going to make a decision to use it. The second rule is that I'm going to be careful so that in my use of AI, my skills as a writer and an artist should not diminish. So anytime I find that I am using AI and I am too attached to it, like the other day electricity went, it cannot be that I cannot work without AI. I have to be able because that is my skill. So I'm not going to give my skill to AI. In a few years when AI might try to take over the world and we unplug it, I don't know who else will be a writer, but I will be a writer still. I will still have my skill. So when I work with AI, even if I'm generating a picture with AI, I'm not going to take 2 hours generating a picture with AI. If it gives me a picture that's like 80%, I download that picture and I edit it myself and I move on because I have the skill and I want to make sure that I continue with my skill. So in my use of AI, I always check to see, am I giving AI my skill or am I benefiting from AI? Because I think as a writer, you have to benefit from AI. You can't just say, okay, well, AI will write the work for me. No, if you want to do, a lot of people, they say they do the outline, but I still get up 3 o'clock in the morning and I'm writing. I was up 3 o'clock this morning writing a romance novel because I do romance. And I can ask AI to write for me, but I make a conscious choice not to ask AI to write certain things for me because there's a certain skill that I want to keep. So therefore, AI does not interfere with that at all. So that is what I say, be careful. Yes, the AI will have your book, but if you deliberately upload your entire book, your entire creative presentation, let AI fight to find your work. Let it go online and try to download your book and stuff like that. But you shouldn't be the one uploading your entire creative process to AI and then arguing that AI is taking work from you. So be smart about it. So there's some things I would never, if AI gets it, it's not getting it from me. So that is my rule. I'm being very careful. The third rule is, I know we spoke before, I am an independent publisher. So I'm not just a writer. In the Caribbean, there isn't much traditional publishing options. So I'm an independent publisher. I'm a entrepreneur, as they say. So I write about 5 books for the year that are my books. And then I have something what you call filler books. So this would be what I would call a filler book. So you see, it's a coloring book on Carnival. So it's something that's creative. It's for the Caribbean region. This book, most of this book is AI generated. So I have AI does certain things for me. And then I have AI in a box of where it can help. So like in this Carnival book, there's activities in the book. There's like I remember asking AI to generate a paragraph and I wanted to, it have the little filler sentences. So I gave that words on Carnival and I said, create 4 paragraphs and for somebody to fill in these words. And it did it beautifully. And that's one of the pages in the book. So I use AI in instances where I would have been frustrated before. So now I have about 5 or 6 of this coming out in the year, in addition to my other books that I'm writing and making money. So I have more books on the shelf, but I'm doing it strategically. This year, I also did a Bible story, not a Bible, a religious storybook. So it's like Christianity, Islam, it was mostly AI, Hindu, spiritual Baptist, Rastafarianism. So, and the Bible is on, I don't own the Bible is on AI, the Bible is on the internet. And so I said, give me a suggestion of 10 stories from the Bible that you could use for children between the ages of so and so. And tell me exactly where you find it. And then I go in the Bible and I make sure it's there because there's a big thing on AI, so that AI is sometimes wrong. So then I I write these stories. I go through and I write these stories for myself with the help of AI. I upload it and I said, now give me some suggestions for pictures. So we go through, and the wonderful thing that I love about AI, it gives me diverse dark skin pictures, which is something that I would not have gotten before. So it gave me these nice, diverse dark skin pictures. So I'm creating a book now. So I lay out the book. I can lay out the book for myself. I do InDesign. I use InDesign. I do my covers for myself. So I'm multi-talented. So now I have a book that's fairly generic because it's a Christian story. I didn't make up the book. The Bible doesn't belong to me or anybody else. So I'm not infringing on anybody's rights. But now I have a book that I can put in stores. So then I go back into the book and I take the 20 color pages that I've generated from AI, and I've said, turn these into black and white color pages. So now I have one book, which is a storybook, and now I have a coloring book with 20 pages in it. So I have 2 books from AI, and I'm still waking up 3 o'clock in the morning writing my romance. I'm still waking up 3 o'clock in the morning writing my other books. That is my creative process. But because I'm running a business and I'm a publisher, I still have to get some other, every month I'd like to have something to sell. And I think my niche has been coloring books, because even though you would think Trinidad and Tobago has a lot of carnival coloring books, they do not. There's not a lot of coloring books that are themed for the Caribbean. So I look and I realize, okay, that's a niche. So I'm going to see if I can put these coloring books out. So now I'm finished. I could get a 3rd book out of this. And you know how I can get a 3rd book out of it? Trinidad and Tobago and the Caribbean is an academic culture. So therefore, I can ask AI to help me create something for teachers. So I'm creating our teacher resources. So I'm asking to do multiple choice questions on the book that I did. Open-ended questions on the book that I did. And I'm offering these questions online for free, so it boosts the marketing of the book. And this is in addition to AI helping me with Facebook posts, you know, the general stuff. Because as a small publisher, you're everything. You're the marketer, you're the publisher. The only thing you don't do is print. So you're everything. So AI helps. But so when I go through, there are certain books, like the coloring books. For example, in the next 2 weeks, I have to go to the zoo in Trinidad and Tobago. There's no coloring book on the zoo in Trinidad and Tobago, and I like to develop that and leave it with them. And so that'll be a money-making consignment. I will go to the zoo and take my own pictures, come home and let AI change those pictures into black and white coloring pages, because the pictures belong to me. Black and white coloring pages, and now I have a coloring book. So AI has helped me push my business by doing other filler books. So I can't say that I'm using AI to write any books that I was writing before, like my romance novels and my middle grade novel. I can't say that. I keep that away from AI because that affects my rule too, which is be careful. But there are so many other options in AI where you can now use, and especially the black and white coloring pages. Even if you have a book, no, instead of getting you want to go and do a reading, you could just take one of the pages and say, change this into a coloring page. You print it out and you carry it for the children to read. So you have like 2 pages that's specific to your book. So it gives writers a lot more options, while I think you can still be careful with it. I don't think that, for example, this book, 30 Caribbean Folklore Legends, I haven't done a teacher's guide on this yet because I have to do it myself. Because the only way I'm going to get this out of AI is if I take my entire book and upload it to AI, and I'm not going to do that. Because that means that rule 2, being careful, I have to think about that, because this is an original book that has never been touched by AI. So therefore, I will not upload this book into AI and ask AI any questions about it. But they are very generic topics, like next year I want to do something on the oceans and the sea. Nobody owns the dolphin, nobody owns turtles, nobody owns the whales. You could develop a coloring book just on the Caribbean Sea and the animals that are in the Caribbean Sea. And these filler books really, they work really good in the bookstore. I found that that extra income is really, really nice in the bookstore, because somebody will come and buy this book, but they will buy the coloring book. They might watch the book and say, I'll buy the coloring book, I'll come back for the book. So AI is definitely something that we could use. And I think in the Caribbean, we use it a lot. I think for pictures, just the diverse, the covers that I could get out of AI, I've never been able to get that sort of diversity in covers, especially from a romance before. So that has been a game changer. However, with AI, I'm still very careful. I have my rules, and every time I have to make a decision for AI, I say, okay, let me see, is this going to affect me adversely, or is this not going to affect me adversely in the long run? Because sometimes you might use AI to do something now, and it's really, as I said before, in the second rule, you have to remember that you still, as a writer, you have to keep writing. So I use AI for certain books, but for other books, there's no AI would not touch it at all. So the question was, how can an author be ethical? I think that was the question. How can an author be ethical?
Yeah, it's a very good question too. The original question was if an author can still be an author in the age of AI.
Yes, I believe that just because AI needs to grow and just because AI needs to develop, it doesn't mean that I have to develop it, and it doesn't mean that I have to grow it. That's it. It will.
I believe we had some connection issues. Marcia, are you there? Can you hear us? Oh gosh, right in the middle of the question, the $1 million question. I believe it's everybody who is not being able to listen to her, right?
Yeah, I think she's frozen.
Yeah, she's totally frozen. Yeah.
Okay. Unfortunately, I really wanted to listen to that answer. I think we can move on and wait for her to come back, and then we can have her again.
Oh,
is that okay?
We lost her.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
there she is.
Yeah, I think I just got, this is the Trinidad and Tobago loop. Yeah, this is Trinidad and Tobago IT loop. So
there you go.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think in the age of AI, I've been using AI every day. And I have not seen that AI
Okay, we're having connection issues again with Marcia. Marcia, if you can hear us, we are going to be here. And I'm going to move on to present John Deegan, and then I'm going to go back to Marcia because I really want to hear her closing remarks. So, John, I was introducing you before it was time, but I'm really happy that you can be here with us. And I'm going to mention it again. John Deegan is a Canadian writer. He is the chair for the IAF and also CEO of the Writers Union of Canada. And he's going to be reflecting with us about how being members and being part of these organizations can help us, in this uphill battle as some of us see it. Thank you so much, Ian, for being here.
Thanks, Alex, and thank everybody for fascinating presentations and conversation. This is just the kind of super nerdy conversation that's right up my alley. I think it was Richard who said he didn't want to use the word nerdy. I love to use the word nerdy in this context. I really feel that I'm with my people here. I have a few observations from what I've heard and obviously some questions for our panelists. But I admit that because of time zones, I've kind of lost track of how much time is left, and I don't think there is a whole lot. So if anybody could provide direction on that, that'd be helpful.
I think it's half an hour you have left, John.
Oh, we do. Okay, that's good. Okay, So the one thing I wanted to point out, I'm coming to you from Canada. The one thing I wanted to point out from Canada, because obviously we're going through all of this ourselves, and so we really depend on the connection of the IAF and all of our partners here to know whether we're moving in the right direction or not. But we've done something that maybe others have not. We have a brand new government here, and that government has created a Ministry of Artificial Intelligence, and that's brand new for our country and something that we could not even have imagined even like 5-10 years ago. So it gives you a sense of how central the tech is to the policy thinking here right now, and that is either a very forward-looking and optimistic way of being right now, or it's terrifying, and we haven't decided quite yet where we fall on that. So I was tasked with coming up with some questions from what we had heard. And what I've discovered is that the panelists themselves have asked all the best questions, and many of them are related. So why don't we just dive into some of them and see where we are with all of them. I know that Richard wanted to know how we all stay sane in this fight. And Kurt's question was also key. Is copyright law still fit for purpose? I think that it has the potential to be, but I also think that there's a hearts and minds battle that we have to win first, and I'm not quite sure where we are with that. Both Paul and Marcia wondered about the responsible and ethical use of AI. How are we all doing with that? I know my Facebook community of authors suggests quite loudly there's no such thing as an ethical use of AI. So how do we deal with that atmosphere of fear and resistance? Richard has told us that authors are very engaged on this, but my question would be, is everyone? I know that I'm dealing with aging parents right now, and I love to do bird photography, and because my father realizes that I love birds, he sends me photographs of birds all the time, 99% of which are AI generated, and I don't have the nerve to tell him that that's the situation. So as far as my 92-year-old father is concerned, there is no such thing as AI. There are just these magical birds that are in the world. But I think the central problem that we're all dealing with, that I got from this conference, is that we're all playing catch up. We, as different territories and organizations, tech has run far ahead of us. It's run far ahead of our national laws, and we're just trying to claw it all back, claw our rights back, protect everything through lawsuits and through lobbying. As Rachel said, the horse has already bolted the stable. So my question, the big question from all those questions for all of you, is that, have we identified any governments who are really thinking ahead and leading on the catch-up effort here? What is the best international model for regulation right now? Where do I point to when I'm talking to my new Ministry of AI, which I will be doing in coming weeks? Does anybody want to field that one?
I'm willing to step in, John, just for the EU to answer your question for the
Great,
EU.
please do, yeah.
Yeah, I would say Denmark, Germany, and Spain.
Yeah.
Denmark already has national legislation protecting the human features and the human voice. In Germany, there are plans, or there have been plans, to create a specific remuneration right for generative AI, and Spain has done the same, but for a series of reasons. The last two projects have not materialized yet, and the Danish presidency of the European Union right now has just sent around a questionnaire on AI, the questions of which indicate, I think, the directions that Denmark would like to take generative AI. So as a very general answer, I would say that finally in the European Union, things are moving, I would say, in the right direction, slowly, but they are moving away from the TDM exception to licensing-based models. We still have the EU AI Act in place, but I may be mistaken, but I have the impression that things are cooking in the kitchen right now, that something's on the stove. There is also the own initiative report of Axel Voss, which is a German member of parliament, also going in the right direction. But in terms of countries, I would say Denmark, Germany, Spain, which is a combination of countries that typically you would not hear often of, I think, but as a very broad answer, of course. Our government is doing nothing significant in Belgium at this stage, but that is not atypical of Belgium, which rarely is a front runner in the field of copyright.
And well, thank you for that. That's very interesting. I'm going to look all of that up. I know that we've talked an awful lot about what happened in the UK with the proposed copyright exception and the big kerfuffle that happened because of that, and the government backing away. Do we think that places the UK? Maybe I'm looking at Kevin or Richard for this. Do we think that places the UK a little further ahead than we might have thought them a little while ago?
I'd love to be that optimistic, John. I think the reality is that they acknowledge a mistake in issuing a public consultation in which they'd identified a favoured option. It seems a bit counterintuitive, that, for a government. So I think, as I said earlier, they're in sort of penance mode and saying, okay, well, let's start again. That wasn't such a good way, but
right.
I guess I wouldn't look also too far beyond the realpolitik of the trade deals that our government has done and the necessity of staying fairly close somehow to what's happening in the US, but also in Europe. So yeah, I'd like to say we were going to come out with a brilliant third way in the coming months, but I wouldn't hold your breath.
Yeah, that's certainly the case. What we're dealing with here in Canada, we've always kind of leaned on the United States to lead on things like this, but things have changed, as we all know, in the last 8 months. Certainly, the Mexico, United States, Canada trade bloc is a whole different animal than it used to be, and so we're a little worried about that. And Umair, just it's not you, it's your president, just so you know. I'm not pointing at you any criticism, but since I have you, Umair, you mentioned sort of the bullying nature of fair use decisions. How confident are we that fair use won't take more of the territory? Because as you know, that the sentiment at least tends to bleed across borders.
Right. Well, I mean, that's a really good question. I think, like I said, I mean, right now we have two opinions that kind of get to opposite conclusions in some way, even though they're both, well, I mean, at least in the Meta case, like Meta won, but the opinion in dicta essentially says that you shouldn't have won if the court had the right kind of evidence. The thing with fair use is, I mean, I think in courts, my sense is, it's, I think if you talk to anyone, it's just like, it's very hard for a court to come out and, come out with a decision that destroys like a sector that's worth several trillions of dollars. So like we already kind of, even going in, realistically speaking, like the relief that the plaintiffs were, some of the plaintiffs were asking for the models to be destroyed, but no court would do that. So I mean, I think we kind of see courts sort of, they don't want to come out and say that this is all okay, but they also, don't quite want to say that this is, this is fair use. I mean, I think that the real question in the fair use framework it comes down to whether or not they're, unauthorized usage is destroying a licensing market. And I think increasingly the answer is yes. I mean, this is what this is what publishers and authors do. They license work for these uses. So I think I'm less concerned about like fair use being expanded, like what happened with Google Books in this situation.
Yeah.
In fact, like the sort of like fair use winds are kind of blowing in the opposite, right? They're sort of like corrective winds, so to speak. Like I said, I talked about the Warhol case, where the court found fair use and said that transformative use was not the end of the inquiry; it was the starting point, and that you had to sort of like it really focus on how the work is being displaced, whether or not the use is transformative. What we're I mean, of course, like the AI industry has really honed in on fair use, and they're pressuring the Trump administration to use executive power to say that this is all fair use, which can't happen. Like it's copyright in the US it's legislated by Congress and interpreted by the courts.
Right.
Nevertheless, there's a lot of process, there's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of pressure on the Copyright Office. We've heard rumblings that, the administration might be pressuring the office to withdraw the fair use report. We've heard about how the tech companies were trying to get the US, because the US Patent and Trademark Office also administers some copyright, and that is within the executive branch. The U.S. Copyright Office is within the legislative branch. So we've heard that tech companies have been trying to get the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office and the Department of Justice to sort of intervene in some of these cases to say that this is all fair use. Yeah. So I mean,
Yeah.
we're in a very weird sort of legal environment right now, because there's all these executive orders that are not legal, but I think as lawyers, we're always the question always arises, is just like I mean, is law just all power? And yeah, in some situations it seems like law is all just power. So anyway, that was a long-winded answer. So I don't think that fair use is going to be like the courts are not going to sort of like expand fair use. They might try to strike a balance that's more sort of favorable, but I can't say the same for the executive branch.
Yeah, this is a good point about the executive branch. I see Mark Zuckerberg eating dinner with Donald Trump. I don't see Stephen King eating dinner with Donald Trump. So yeah, the influence is there for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Kurt, you have your hand up. You wanted to add something there?
Yeah, I wanted to touch upon court rulings in Europe very briefly, because I just shared in the chat the first ever referral to the European Court of Justice on generative AI, and especially the TDM exception of which I spoke about. It's a Hungarian case referred by the Court of Appeal of Budapest to the European Court of Justice, and it's at the very heart of all the legal issues pertaining to AI in Europe. So it's a case worth following. It's jurisprudence in Europe, unlike the US, is very non-existing, I would almost say. The only ruling, to my knowledge at least, on AI is a German one, the Laion case, Laion, which is a very, very strange ruling. Indeed, very negative for rights holders, in which the German judge ruled that even if a database with copyrighted works is made available by a non-for-profit organization to a for-profit AI platform, it remains TDM for scientific research, and there is an exception even without opt-out for the rights holder. So that was a very negative ruling. The only positive thing about it is that the German judge also decided that an opt-out can also be done in plain text. You don't need a protocol to do it, he said. But that was about the only positive thing about the German ruling. But there are two major court cases pending. There is a German one initiated by the CMO, the music CMO GEMA. And there is another one in France initiated by the Publishers Association, SNE. So there is a bit of jurisprudence, court rulings, but not to the same extent as the US. And the other thing I wanted to say, just touching upon what Richard said, In terms of licensing models for AI, the one thing that I forgot to mention is that we also have a business license at Reprobel, quite successful, called Busily. And we are taking a slightly different approach because we are a smaller country, and this may be relevant for some Caribbean countries as well. We are a smaller country with 3 official languages. I'm Flemish and Dutch speaking, but we also have a French speaking part and a German speaking part in Belgium. And the thing is that for us, it's very difficult to put a central platform license in the market. I mean, very few AI developers would be interested in Belgian content if it's not Lucky Luke, the Smurfs, or Tintin, to put it very bluntly, or Magritte, maybe with a bit of chance. But we are a small country, so platform licensing, I think, for us is very difficult indeed. The same goes even for the TDM license that CLA and CCC have incorporated into their business license. But we are looking into something else, which is a small feature. We have our business license busily in place, but we are working on a premium version of that license that would extend the license coverage to, for instance, publications on social media or on publicly available websites. But a feature we would like to include in that business license is a sort of regularization AI license for end users, because businesses and public authorities often use ChatGPT, DALL-E, and other AI tools. But the outcome of that, if an employee types in a prompt and it generates a certain outcome, DALL-E, for instance, or Stable Diffusion, that may very well be a copyright infringement for which the licensing, the AI platforms, terms and conditions may hold the end user liable. So it's legal insecurity, and that is a patch that we would like to solve in our business premium license. So it's another approach to AI licensing, but it's less ambitious than our highly esteemed colleagues at CLA and CCC. We don't have the scale, although we collect 30 million euros per year as well. We remain a small country. We don't have the scale to put a platform license in the market, but we are looking into that end user AI license in our business license as an extension to the license, and that looks promising, subject to our internal board discussions. It's not formal yet, but it's an interesting element of business licensing that is worth looking into, especially by smaller CMOs that want to start AI licensing. It is an AI license after all. So, and that's it from me.
Thanks, Kurt. Rachel, you have your hand up?
I just want to jump in terms of who's leading the charge or what is happening even in our diaspora. Now, recently, well, fairly recently, the Caribbean Court of Justice had put out a guideline, more or less, with respect to how, I guess, the court treats with AI. What they called it was the Caribbean Court of Justice Practice Direction in terms of the use of generative AI for drafting submissions, right? And there was actually a case shortly after that practice direction came out, which for some strange reason, the lawyers used AI to source articles for their defense, and it seemed as if those citations were not actually factual. And so the judge made a finding that this will be prohibited, and therefore it's the responsibility of lawyers to do their due diligence and ensure that they get the right citations for the cases. So the Caribbean Court of Justice has this directive which guides lawyers in the court system in terms of how you use AI, what can be used in terms of their submissions and what cannot be used. So they said that it prohibits its use in the drafting of affidavits and stuff like that, but it can be used in terms of getting some material in terms of for evidence purposes. And I also believe that China, in terms of what Kurt mentioned concerning the filings, they actually have some platform liability for generative AI. They have started that in their court system, as well as in terms of the patents filing. They seem to be leading the charge in the world in terms of AI patent filings, and their National Intellectual Property Administration guides in terms of the examination tools that they use for AI-related inventions. So I think that is a step in the right direction, and they seem to be looking at different ways in order to kind of create that balance and scale things forward.
Wow, talk about the ethical use of AI. My goodness, false information in affidavits. That's something else. Umair, you had your hand up, but you put it down. Are you okay?
Yeah, I mean, I just if we have time, I just had like I actually had a question for Kurt in regards to TDM. You know, you mentioned I think, you know, whether or not generative AI even like falls under TDM it seems to be such a you know, not a clear-cut question. I mean, as far as I understand, the models are kind of compression of the information. It's not. So the training is not really data mining. It's almost like extracting the expressive elements of a work. I mean, this is something, a kind of conversation that we're having in the US too. You know, initially the AI companies came out and they said, well, you know, we don't really copy any expression. And it came up in one of the cases where in the Meta case, the judge said, no, actually, like you are fundamentally copying expression. And, you know, computer scientists will say it's what a model is. It's a compression. It's like, you know, you get like an MP3 is a compression of a vinyl record. It's so anyway, I just wanted to hear, Kurt, if like that sort of debate is happening about even the applicability of TDM sort of frameworks to generative AI.
Yes, thank you, Umair, for your excellent question. A couple of things on TDM. Yes, we have that debate, but I would say more at a learned writing level than at jurisprudence level right now, because there's very few court rulings in the matter. But yes, the question has been raised. Two things on text and data mining. First of all, text and data mining pertains to the legal access to a work and the content of a work. The actual factual content of a work. These are two things that are not copyright relevant. Copyright protects the form of a work, not its content, and it doesn't protect the access to the work. That's a contractual issue. So the European legislator has introduced an exception for TDM, which is an exception for things that should not fall under copyright law. And if a legislator decides to provide for exceptions for something that should be not copyright law relevant, you have to be very worried as a rights holder, which is exactly what has happened. Secondly, in my compendium of Belgian copyright law, I wrote a funny bit about AI and TDM, and I said, saying that text and data mining is the same as generative AI is the same as saying that my Volvo EX30, which is an electric car, is the same as a skateboard because they both have 4 wheels, make little noise, and don't consume fuel. That's basically what it is. The generative AI is much more than TDM. The question whether there is TDM involved, I leave that open, but there is a German learned writer who said, yes, there is, but to a very limited extent, because obviously there is reproduction at the training stage. Everybody telling you otherwise has a hidden agenda. At the very least, you cannot train a system without reproducing. We've checked it with IT experts in Belgium. They checked, double checked and triple checked, and they all said there is reproduction. Is there text and data mining? Possibly directly, possibly indirectly, because if you want to train a system how to recognize the works of the Smurfs or Magritte or Rothko or whatever, name any textual or visual author, it will have to detect patterns in the various source works, and detecting patterns in the source works is text and data mining. So yes, but the big debate, the big legal debate in Europe was not, is it TDM? The big legal debate is, do these systems reproduce? Is there a reproduction act involved? As you have said as well, they claim that there isn't. Luckily for us, or unluckily, because I've seen some very strange rulings of the European Court of Justice recently, and I'm not talking about the 2 Reprobel rulings, but other rulings. Luckily or unluckily, this is the first and the third question in the Hungarian case referred to the European Court of Justice is AI reproduction, and does the TDM exception apply? So we will have feedback from the Court of Justice in a year and a half or so, if we're lucky, but we will typically have an opinion of the Advocate General, I would say within the year, and the European Court in 2/3 of its cases, it follows the opinion of the AG. It's not a hard rule, but it typically does. So very interesting. I think that's one of the key questions the field of generative AI, what is its legal status? If you look at the AI process, the training process, what is its legal status? Is it reproduction? Is it making available? Is it adaptation? My personal belief is that it is all of those things, plus a little bit of TDM. So to the extent that there would be an exception applicable for TDM, it's only for a very limited part of the training process, but the rest of it is adaptation, reproduction, and making available, which are exclusive copyrights in the EU and which should be licensing based.
Thank you. Rachel, you have a comment?
I just want to comment based on what Umair said and what Kurt said. I'm wondering if his question falls under the Mickey Mouse problem scenario in terms of what AI does in terms of memorizing the training of the data sets and all these different things. So based on the question, I stand to agree with Kurt that it will fall in line with both the training of the data sets as well as how they learn, how they process, how they memorize, which is in essence the issue that we have here today.
And just maybe touching upon what Rachel just said, don't forget that there is reproduction at the input stage training, but there is also reproduction in refining what they have in their model, and there is reproduction at the output stage, because what you have is a sort of synthetic synthesizing adaptation of a whole series of source works by the same author or various authors. So there is reproduction throughout the process, and they say, yeah, maybe it's memorizing without reproducing, but they are functioning in the way that the human brain functions. That's what they claim. They are neural networks. The only issue is that nobody really knows how the human brain functions. But when I look at my 12-year-old, I have the impression that she cannot memorize without reproducing, and she cannot reproduce without memorizing. So I think from a technical perspective, it's a false claim that there is no reproduction act involved.
Thank you. Okay, I'm conscious that we are running a bit short on time. We have a few questions in the Q&A, but Alex, you have your hand up, and Paul, do you have comments?
I did want to ask a question, but I'm going to give my turn to Fernanda. So please go ahead,
great.
Fernanda.
Hello, Fernanda. You're still muted, Fernanda.
Sorry, yeah, I have
We
a
can hear
question
you now.
for now. Yeah, okay. What do the organizations as the ones that are member of IIF in Latin America and Caribbean have to do? Because we are not licensing, we are not going to be in the negotiations of the licensing because we don't kind of attributions, but we want to be in the discussions and we want to be back of our members. So what do you think that this kind of organizations as Haiku, for example, or Ametli has to do in this moment? Anyone who wants to answer?
It's an excellent question. Does anybody have a global perspective that they could bring?
So, if John, I have
yeah, go ahead,
a point
Kevin.
to make on that, if I may. So I mentioned earlier that at WIPO in Geneva, there are a series of initiatives coming up, not least the AIII, which I mentioned, and various debates in the SCCR, the Standing Committee for Copyright and Related Rights. So what members can do from the Caribbean and other places is to use the power of your delegates' voices in the committees and meetings and researches at WIPO. You have a lot of delegates from the Caribbean. One of the advantages of being a small state is that you have an equal vote and an equal voice to the huge countries of the world. So Trinidad and Tobago has the same ability to speak at in UN fora as the US does. So brief your delegates at these meetings about these important issues. Ask them to follow the debates, ask them to go to the meetings and give them a good script to talk to. And actually, you can liaise with us on that as well, because if you find some traction amongst the IP specialists from your country, do let us know, because we would like to liaise with them. We would like to brief them. We would like to encourage them to speak on matters which we're trying to push forward. So you actually do have a great deal of power. Please leverage it, and please let us know how you proceed with that. Thank you, Fernanda, for the question. Good question.
Appreciate that, Kevin. I was going to ask you actually how authoritative you thought that whole WIPO process was going to be. So that's good information. We have run out of time. If you be a little patient, I just want to get one question from the Q&A so that we honor the folks who have been watching. There's a great question here for Umair, who mentioned the Human Author certification program through the Authors Guild. And the question is, how can you be sure that the authors are only using AI for spell check and grammar? And is there a process you use to verify their humanness, I guess would be the question. Umair?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. Right now, there are some algorithmic based sort of detecting tools out there, but they're really unreliable. So we decided not to use any kind of AI-based detection. Right now, the enforcement is basically contractual. If we find out that you misused the human authored mark, you could be, it's a registered trademark. So we could seek contractual remedies and get them taken down. But yeah, I mean, as far as actual verification, it's we're still at a very early stages of how to sort of verify human generated text.
Thank you. That's very interesting. I've looked onto that website myself to maybe register myself. I thought it was quite a unique approach to the problem. I'm going to wrap us up because I personally have to go. I think Katie has mentioned to me privately that the forum can stay up online if people have more discussion that they want to do person to person. That's fine. I just want to say thank you very, very much for the opportunity to experience this today. If we go all the way back to Philippa's introduction early on when she was talking about Jamcopy and about how interconnected we all are, it really is clear in terms of rights and licenses and markets, just how interconnected this world is and how important we all are to each other. So as much of this kind of information sharing and cooperative work that we can do, it's all to the better. So I wanted to thank especially the IAF. I want to thank Kevin and Thanasis, who's in the background, and Katie and Maria Fernanda and Alex, who have worked to put this together, and the rest of the team at the International Authors Forum. This has been an incredible opportunity for connection, and I really value it. Coming from a smaller market like Canada. So thank you all. I'm going to sign off. If you stay on and talk, I will know nothing about it. But we'll talk again soon. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you, John.
Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, everybody. Appreciate all of your time. I've just noted in the webinar chat that there were a number of questions which went unanswered, but you've obviously been with us for more than 3 hours now. So perhaps if you don't mind, we can circulate those questions, and then when we circulate the recording to everybody who's registered for the conference, because there are also lots of people who wanted to be here today and couldn't, and have expressed interest in the recording, then perhaps we can try and fill in some of that information that obviously has been asked in the Q&A. So thank you all very much for your time and for absolutely fascinating presentations. Also, there have been a number of questions for people to share their